Hi, my name is Genesis Romero, and for my video reflection, I chose topic 3. I will begin by discussing positive psychology and its approaches to children with unhealthy parenting and the effect on their development. Later on, I will also be covering some concepts brought up in the Dalai Lama's speech on the seeds of love and compassion. Positive psychology's main concepts. Unlike most other psychological approaches to personality, positive psychology offers a new take where rather than focusing on past problems, underlying negative factors, and weaknesses, it promotes present experiences and individual strengths to further establish a happier, more positive way of life. The field of positive psychology lies on its 3 pillars: positive subjective experience, positive traits, and positive institutions. Positive subjective experience is the first pillar of positive psychology. As we've discussed throughout the semester, experiences play a substantial role in our overall happiness. Through this pillar of positive psychology, our experiences, or better yet, our reaction and perspective on said experiences, can be measured to assess our subjective well-being, meaning how happy or satisfied we are with our lives. There are many interrelated factors in positive subjective experience. For example, through the shown flow spiral, we can see that our positive emotion and/or reactions motivate us to engage in activities that direct us towards self-growth and ultimately help us perform better, which will bring on greater satisfaction in our overall life. When we apply these ideas to a child who hasn't had the healthiest structure for personality development, we find that they stay fixated on the negative and harmful situation they've experienced, rather than finding satisfaction in their current situation and enabling this cycle of flow. We find a similar concept in the second noble truth of the Buddhist worldview, which elaborates on the origin of suffering. The second noble truth states that those who are caught up in samsara, what's referred to as the wheel of suffering, prevent their own enlightenment by staying attached to things they believe will bring them happiness, when they're actually keeping them in misery. This can be directly related to the way an adopted child could constantly wish they knew who their biological parents were, why they chose not to raise them, or what their life would have been if they did. But in all reality, who's to say that dropping this attachment of rejection they felt throughout their entire lives isn't actually the better approach to a happier life? The second pillar of positive psychology is positive traits. Though from what we've learned, traits are for the most part inherited. But in positive psychology, it is held that traits can also be learned and practiced for a more positive outcome in day-to-day life. Some examples of positive traits are optimism, hope, positive thinking, active coping, spirituality, and resiliency. Optimism, or the tendency to expect positive rather than negative outcomes, is not only beneficial to our overall happiness, but also our mental and physical health. According to the text, studies show that individuals with an optimistic perspective will have lower levels of stress and depression and have better expectations for the future. Resiliency is the ability to come back and recuperate from stressful situations without experiencing the usual negative consequences of such experiences. Resiliency is not only a trait, but also a set of habits that can be taught and learned. Resiliency in orphans or children with unhealthy parents will most likely be very low, but resiliency in these individuals is probably one of the best traits they can have. An individual who lacks solid and healthy parenting will often lack the ability to stand up from a fall, considering the fact that with every fall they've experienced, they grow a little weaker. Fortunately, through practicing resiliency, there is hope that these individuals will ultimately find meaning from these falls rather than just dwelling on their own grief. The third pillar of positive psychology is positive institutions. Positive psychology puts a lot of emphasis on the significance of positive institutions, such as school and the workplace. Through their school environment and education, orphan children who have been adopted or children with unhealthy parents can find means to develop their own resiliency, strengths, and skills to ultimately improve their overall life satisfaction. Similarly, adults who have not yet developed or attained their basic needs can develop them through their work environment. 2010, The Dalai Lama delivered a speech in which he describes early presentations of love and compassion in children and its effect on their future life satisfaction and happiness. In this speech, he made powerful connections to various personality theories we've discussed throughout the semester. The main concepts I've chosen are his emphasis on early experiences and compassion. One of the first things mentioned in this speech is the idea that human survival is entirely dependent on the care that we receive from our mothers when we are born. He mentions that our first deep and happy experience is that which comes from our mother's care and welcome, and similarly, that a mother's care for her child produces a tremendous feeling of joyfulness within her. At an evolutionary approach, as discussed in Chapter 9, we learn that parents who nurture their children at an early age will increase chances of their gene survival. Additionally, a strong and supportive early environment will not only determine survival, but also the psychological health and development of the child. The Dalai Lama also mentions that individuals who experience maximum affection at an early age show greater emotion, deeper insight, more happiness, stability, and greater skill. Through the interpersonal psychoanalytic theory, we learn that there's a very significant connection between a parent's behavior toward the child and the way the child's personality develops. While the Dalai Lama mentions that children who receive maximum affection will in turn develop a variety of positive traits, Horney emphasizes the idea that the basic evil within the family lies in a lack of genuine warmth and affection. When parental behavior is neglectful or even just indifferent, a child's development will most likely steer negatively and away from all the positive mentioned in the Dalai Lama's speech. Another point the Dalai Lama made was the idea that orphan children generally have a more difficult time during development, but that if the child is adopted and the foster parent becomes what he refers to as a real parent, that the experience of development for the orphan can change. Going back to what we learned from Horney, the development of our sense of self is greatly affected in the early years of our life and inclusively extremely dependent on the relationships we have with our parents. In relation to the Dalai Lama's concept, it can be assumed that when an orphan is adopted, the idea that they have at least some sort of parental relationship, regardless if it's optimum or not, gives them a higher chance to develop normally. He also makes note of the wide-known idea that children who experience abuse at an early age continue to experience this abuse throughout the rest of their life and will consequently develop issues with their mental and physical health. According to the text, children whose earliest relationships were unhealthy or abusive were more likely to develop unhealthy and self-destructive behaviors, even to the point of suicide, whereas children with healthy parents were less likely to suffer from various personality disorders. Compassion. One of the central concepts in the Dalai Lama's speech is the idea that compassion is essentially a seed planted within us through the care that we receive from our mothers. He notes that compassion is generally developed later on in life, but that it holds within us from very early on. His idea and emphasis on the importance of compassion can be directly related to Adler's description of a healthy style of life, the socially useful type. An individual with a socially useful style of life will generally act for the benefit of others and usually have a well-developed sense of social interest. Much like the Dalai Lama's compassion, Adler emphasizes the importance of social interest and its basis of promoting good over personal welfare. Additionally, the concepts of compassion and social interest have many common ideologies one of which is that they are both inherent abilities, able to be practiced and strengthened, something the Dalai Lama mentioned in his own personal experience. Another similarity lies in the idea that both social interest and compassion foster a sense of meaning in one's life. And finally, that a lack of compassion or social interest have a substantial effect on the psychological well-being and development of a person. To conclude my project, I wanted to end with a quote that I found while I was researching on the Dalai Lama. It says, "Compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and a sense of self-discipline are qualities that help us lead our daily lives with a calm mind.